The first gunshot came at 7:14 in the morning, just as the cafeteria finished brewing its second pot of coffee. No one moved, not immediately. The human brain, in its stubborn optimism, spends the first 3 seconds convincing itself that it heard a car backfire, a dropped tray, a slammed door, anything but what it actually was. By the time the second shot rang out, sharper, closer, completely undeniable, the cafeteria of St. Carver Memorial Hospital erupted. Chairs scraped. Trays clattered to the floor. A woman near the vending machines released a scream that cut clean through the noise. People dove beneath tables, pressed themselves flat against walls, fumbled for phones with shaking fingers. The fluorescent lights above flickered once, as if the building itself had flinched. In the middle of all of it, a man sat completely still. His name, according to the hospital's volunteer roster, was Daniel Mercer, 41 years old. Occupation: handyman. He had been at St. Carver for 11 months, fixing leaky pipes in the oncology ward, repainting the faded murals in the pediatric unit, replacing broken ceiling tiles without being asked, the kind of man nobody quite noticed and nobody could imagine doing without. He wore faded canvas work pants and a grey Henley with the sleeves pushed up, and his hands, large, calloused, crossed loosely on the table, rested around a paper cup of black coffee. Those hands did not tremble. While everyone around him scrambled and ducked and prayed, Daniel's eyes moved in a slow, methodical arc across the room. Not the wide, frantic eyes of a frightened civilian, something slower, more deliberate, the way a camera pans when it already knows what it is looking for. The cafeteria had 2 entry points, one bank of windows facing the east parking lot, 43 people visible, 3 exits. His mind processed this information in under 4 seconds, the way other people process breathing, effortlessly, automatically, without needing to be told. A third shot, then silence, then a voice, amplified and distorted through a cheap megaphone, echoing from the direction of the main lobby. Nobody leaves, nobody calls. You do exactly what we say, and everyone goes home. Daniel set down his coffee cup. He looked at it for a moment, the thin curl of steam still rising from it, perfectly indifferent to the world coming apart around it. Then he stood. A young nurse named Rosa grabbed his arm. She was 26 years old, first year out of nursing school, still wearing the slightly too bright scrubs of someone who hadn't yet learned that hospitals age you fast. Her face had gone white beneath her warm complexion. "Sir, you need to get down, and they said nobody moves." "How many nurses are on the 3rd floor right now?" Daniel asked. His voice was quiet, completely conversational, as if he'd asked her the time. Rosa blinked. "What? 3rd floor, post-surgical recovery. How many staff on shift?" 3, maybe 4 on the morning rotation. Any patients on ventilators?" She stared at him. 2, maybe 3. He nodded slowly, as though confirming something he already suspected. "Stay here," he said. "Keep people calm. Don't let anyone rush the exits." He held her gaze for a moment, and something in his eyes, not coldness, not cruelty, but a bedrock authority so deep it had no edges, made her let go of his arm without another word. "I'll be back." He moved toward the service corridor behind the kitchen, the one most volunteers didn't know existed, keeping low along the wall, unhurried and deliberate. Near the corridor door, he passed the maintenance supply closet. He paused, opened it, scanned the shelves with the practiced efficiency of a man reading a map he had long since memorized. He took 2 items and slipped them into his pocket. Then he was through the door, and the cafeteria disappeared behind him. In the hallway, his breathing changed, slowed, deepened. His pulse, which had never risen above 70, settled further still. This too was something his body simply knew how to do, a biological discipline forged across 15 years and 4 continents and 100 operations that officially never happened. His body did not know how to panic. It had been trained out of him so thoroughly that the training had become something else. Not discipline anymore. Nature. His name was not Daniel Mercer. That was the name on the volunteer badge clipped to his Henley. The name on the lease for the small apartment 6 blocks from the hospital. The name on the library card he used to check out thick military history books and thin paperback crime novels. It was the name he had built for himself, carefully and methodically, when he walked away from a world that offered no clean exits, only men who disappeared quietly and men who didn't. He had chosen quiet. For 3 years, it had worked. For 3 years, the other life, the one with no name, no paper trail, no official existence, had stayed buried beneath the ordinary weight of ordinary days. He had fixed pipes, he had painted walls, He had learned the names of the children in the pediatric ward and brought coffee to the overnight security guards and done exactly what a handyman does, which is show up, do the work, and go unnoticed. The megaphone crackled again, closer now. We are aware that someone called emergency services. Let us be very clear. Anyone who interferes will remind us why we brought enough ammunition for a very long morning. He paused at the intersection of two corridors, listening. 3 distinct voices, possibly 4, armed, organized, and patient. Not the improvised desperation of a robbery, but something planned and rehearsed. The phone junction box on the wall had been cleanly severed. Professionals. Which meant they had a specific objective, not chaos. A target. He needed to know what it was. And somewhere above him, 2 patients on ventilators needed power that would fail the moment these men decided to make an example of someone. He had 312 people in this building, at least 4 armed men, no weapon, no backup, and no cover story that survived a single pat-down. He had disappeared once before from a world far more dangerous than this one. The question now was whether disappearing was still an option, or whether the man he used to be had just walked back through the door. He found the first gunman at the end of the east corridor, where the hallway bent toward the radiology wing. The man was young, mid-20s, tactical vest, rifle held across his chest with the particular posture of someone trained but not yet tested. There's a difference, and it matters enormously. Trained means they know the theory. Tested means the theory has been run through conditions that don't forgive errors. This one was trained. Daniel could read it in the way the man's eyes swept the hallway too wide and too regularly. A metronome, not a predator. Daniel slipped into an empty patient room, pressing against the wall just inside the doorframe. The bed had been recently vacated. The breakfast tray was still on the rolling table, the indentation in the pillow still holding its shape. He waited. He counted footsteps. He felt the subtle shift in air pressure as the gunman passed. Then he moved. It was over in 4 seconds. No noise. The man was on the floor, wrists secured behind him with the cable ties Daniel had taken from the supply closet, unconscious and breathing steadily. The rifle was in Daniel's hands. He removed the magazine, cleared the chamber, placed both pieces separately on the bed. Weapons were a last resort here, not a first one. Not in a building full of patients and narrow corridors and innocent people whose only crime was being unwell. He took the man's radio instead. Static. Then, East Wing, check in. Silence. East Wing. Marco, you copy? Daniel pressed the transmit button twice in rapid succession. The universal non-verbal signal for busy. Stand by. A technique that bought minutes, not hours. He was already moving. The radio traffic filled in the picture as he navigated upward through the service stairwell. 4 men confirmed, 2 holding the main lobby and its 60 hostages, 1 roving the upper floors, and a 4th that the radio referred to only as the doctor, spoken with the particular weight of an objective, not a person. That word dropped into Daniel's chest like cold water, because it meant this was not about the building or its contents. It was about a specific individual. They were here for a patient. He reached the 3rd floor. The post-surgical recovery ward was exactly as Rosa had described. 3 nurses pressed low behind the station, a handful of conscious patients watching the door with the hollow-eyed vigilance of people too ill to run, but too alive to stop paying attention. Daniel moved to the station, crouching below the sightline of the hallway windows. "I need your patient roster," he said quietly. Anyone admitted in the last 72 hours under a protective flag, a law enforcement alias, or with federal documentation. The head nurse looked at him. She was mid-50s, silver hair pulled severely back, with the particular composure of someone who had run cardiac codes for 30 years and learned to triage everything, including unusual requests from the building's handyman during a hostage situation. She pulled up the terminal without asking for an explanation. One name carried a flag. Room 318. A man listed as Elias Varga admitted 2 days ago for a gunshot wound, identity protected under a federal alias. Protection detail, the flag noted, had been reassigned 6 hours earlier. Routine resource reallocation, the kind of bureaucratic decision that looked completely innocent right up until the moment it didn't. "Lock this station down," Daniel said. "If the power cuts, the manual override for the ventilators is the red panel on the east wall. Don't wait for authorization. Just do it." He held the head nurse's gaze. She nodded once, sharp, complete, no questions. He moved toward 318. The roving gunman found him first. He came around the corner fast and already calibrated, rifle raised before he had fully finished turning. Experienced in a way that Marco hadn't been, his eyes were flat and professional. "Don't," he said. One word, all that was needed. Daniel stopped. He raised his hands slowly. The radio, visible, in his left. His right hand, empty. "Maintenance," Daniel said. "The backup power panel on this floor has been surging. I was trying to get ahead of it before it trips the ventilators." He kept his voice steady and slightly aggrieved, the tone of a man irritated at being interrupted during a job. "I don't want any trouble." The gunman's gaze moved to Daniel's hands. The size of them, the old scars running across the knuckles, the way the tendons stood taut when Daniel raised them, like cables under load. A flicker moved behind the man's eyes, the small involuntary recalibration of someone who has just noticed something that doesn't quite add up. "On your knees," he said. "Sure," Daniel said, and began to lower himself. And the moment the rifle barrel dipped fractionally to track the motion, Daniel was no longer where he had been. It was nothing like the way it looks in films. There was no elegance to it, no aesthetics. It was fast and violent and brutally efficient, and when it was over, 3 seconds, maybe 4, the gunman was against the wall, disarmed, pinned, and making the specific sound of a man who has just arrived at a very clear and very late understanding. "The man in room 318, Daniel said. His forearm was still against the man's throat, his voice still completely level. "Who sent you?" Silence. "I'm not law enforcement," Daniel said. "I'm not going to read you your rights or fill out a report. I'm going to ask you one more time." A name came out. Daniel recognized it immediately, and the recognition moved through him the way cold moves through a room when a window is opened in winter. Sudden, total, and impossible to stop. It was a name from the other life, the one with no name, no face, no record. A name connected to an operation 6 years ago in a country that officially denied American presence within its borders. A name that was supposed to be secured in a federal holding facility in Virginia. Supposed to be. The gunman on the floor looked up at Daniel with something new in his expression. The professional flatness was gone. What replaced it was something the man had probably not felt in a long time. The radio on the floor between them crackled. "Status on the package. We move in 4 minutes. 4 minutes." 3 years of ordinary days, the pipes, the paint, the library card, the coffee, the names of the children, shifted in Daniel's mind like tectonic plates. Beneath them, something older. Something that had never actually gone away. He had not buried the other life, he had covered it, and it had been there the whole time, waiting with the infinite patience of things that don't need to hurry because they know you'll come back to them eventually. The gunman on the floor stared at him, and in his eyes was the specific fear of a man who had just understood what he was looking at. Not a handyman, not a civilian, not even a soldier in any conventional sense. Something the briefings referred to in the past tense and the passive voice. A capability. Not a person. An asset that existed in no records and answered to no authority except its own judgment and its own compass. The man they had called Ghost, who had disappeared 3 years ago, and whom everyone with sufficient clearance had quietly concluded was dead. Room 318 smelled of antiseptic and the particular kind of fear that belongs to a man who knows exactly what is coming and has already made his peace with the fact that he cannot stop it alone. Elias Varga was propped up against the pillows, pale and bandaged across the chest, but his eyes were sharp and immediate, the eyes of a man whose body was failing him and whose mind had decided not to follow. He was 60 years old, compact and weathered, and he carried the deep, particular stillness of someone who had spent decades in the kind of work that teaches you to be invisible in a room. When Daniel stepped through the door, Varga looked at him the way trained eyes look at things, not at the canvas work pants, not at the hospital volunteer badge, but at the hands, at the posture, at the specific quality of silence that moved with him. "Ghost," Varga said, not a name, a designation, a call sign that Daniel had not heard spoken aloud in 3 years and which landed in the room like something dropped from a great height. "Don't," Daniel said. "They found you." Still not a question. "They found you," Daniel said. "I was just in the building." He moved to the window, keeping to the side of the frame, checking the east parking lot below. 3 vehicles, parked in a pattern slightly too deliberate to be coincidental. A 4th man outside overwatch position near the service entrance. "How compromised is your location?" "Completely." Varga shifted against the pillow and grimaced at what the movement cost him. "Someone inside the marshal's office. The protection detail wasn't reassigned. It was pulled, deliberately, by someone with enough access to know my alias and enough reach to move resources without triggering a review." He paused, reading Daniel's face. The name that sent them. You already know it. Sokolov, Daniel said. He got out of the Virginia facility 14 days ago, transferred on paper. In reality, extracted by the same network we thought we had dismantled. Varga's voice was flat and careful, the voice of a man delivering information he wishes he didn't have. He knows about Meridian. The word landed the way certain words do. Not loudly, but with a weight that changes the atmosphere of a room. Meridian. An operation so deeply classified, it existed in fewer than 12 files, all of them long since destroyed, all names redacted even from those. An operation that had required Daniel to spend 8 months in 3 countries, doing things that had no legal framework and no moral category other than necessary, and which he had spent the subsequent 3 years building ordinary days over, carefully, brick by careful brick, the way you build scar tissue over a wound, not healing it, covering it. If Sokolov surfaces and talks, Varga continued, everything burns, every asset connected to Meridian, every handler, every name, the whole architecture. He looked at Daniel steadily. Your name. My name is Daniel Mercer, Daniel said. He said it the way you say something you know to be true, even as you feel it becoming less true in real time. The radio crackled on the floor behind him. The lobby team, losing patience. Status on the package. We are moving now. Confirm position. No time left for the luxury of grief. Daniel ran the variables with the cold, clean efficiency of a mind trained for exactly this. Not for comfort, not for the careful weighing of options, but for finding the single viable path in the space where paths are not supposed to exist. 2 men in the lobby, 60 hostages. 1 man down in the east corridor, 1 man outside in overwatch, 1 man on the floor of this hallway, secured and conscious. He had the radio. He had the element of complete unknown. They did not know who he was, which meant they did not know what was possible. That asymmetry was an advantage, not a large one, large enough. Can you walk? He asked Varga. With help. Then we go now. He helped the older man to his feet, 1 arm around his back, moving with the careful deliberateness of someone who understood that a man with a chest wound could not be hurried without becoming a man with a ruptured chest wound. They moved into the corridor. Daniel chose a path that ran along the interior wall, away from the main sightlines, and he adopted a pace that, in a building in crisis, registered as purposeful and authoritative rather than fugitive. 2 men moving somewhere with a reason. The most invisible thing in a chaotic environment is certainty. They passed the nurse's station. The head nurse looked up from the manual override panel. She had already positioned herself beside it, 1 hand resting on the red switch. Her eyes moved from Varga to Daniel and back. She said nothing. She understood, the way genuinely competent people understand without needing explanation, that the man who had given her instructions had known exactly what he was talking about. The lobby team broke from the script at the 50-second mark, as Daniel had calculated they would. He heard their voices surge through the radio, sharp, clipped, the specific tone of men who have just realized that the plan has developed an unforeseen variable. By the time they crossed toward the east wing, Daniel and Varga were at the service level, moving through the loading dock door, the one with the broken latch that Daniel had propped open with a rubber wedge 3 days earlier, because the repair was still on his maintenance list. He had not known, when he wedged that door open, why he'd left it. He knew now. The morning air outside was pale and cold and indifferent. The sky, the particular colorless gray of early hours before the sun has committed to anything. Daniel guided Varga against the exterior wall, out of the parking lot sightlines. Sirens, distant but rising, the sound of a world that had been called and was finally arriving. He reached into his pocket for the second phone, not the volunteer's phone. The other one, no SIM card, no registered number, no official existence. He typed a 9-digit sequence from memory, a sequence he had memorized years ago during a briefing he was never supposed to need again, and placed the call to a number that rang in a building in Northern Virginia that officially did not accept incoming communications. It answered on the second ring. Ghost. A voice he recognized, older than he remembered. Not surprised. I need a sweep team at St. Carver Memorial Hospital. 4 hostiles. 1 secured, 3 active. 1 federal protected witness in my custody, GSW to the chest, needs a surgical team. I need this clean, and I need it quiet. He paused. And when it's done, I need to go back to being dead. A silence on the line. The kind of silence that is not emptiness, but calculation. Understood, the voice said. 12 minutes. He ended the call. Beside him, Varga breathed carefully in the morning air, 1 hand pressed flat against his bandaged chest. He looked at Daniel with the expression of a man who had spent his entire adult life in the deepest shadows of intelligence work and who recognized in the man beside him the same architecture, the same discipline, the same cost, the same particular species of loneliness that came with being someone who officially wasn't. "You were really going to do it," Varga said quietly. "Just live here, fix pipes, disappear." "I was fixing pipes," Daniel said. "You can't go back, you understand that. After today, after they know you're operational." "I know." The words came out flat and honest and final. He did know. The volunteer badge in his pocket, the apartment 6 blocks away, the library card, the names of the children in the pediatric ward, the overnight guards with their cold coffee. He could feel all of it already shifting in his mind, already becoming the memory of a life rather than the life itself. He breathed through it, the way he breathed through everything that cost something, steadily, completely, without looking away. "I know." The sweep team arrived in 11 minutes. They were quiet, precisely as requested. No visible markings, no noise, the efficient invisibility of people who had practiced this until it became reflex. They took Varga. They cleared the building with a speed and completeness that the local police, still establishing their perimeter outside the main entrance, would later find impossible to fully account for. The gunmen were removed. The hostages were released. In the subsequent official reports, the incident would be attributed to a foiled robbery attempt. The heroes would be unnamed. The details would be clean and incomplete and entirely wrong. Rosa found Daniel on the loading dock steps when it was over, sitting in the same posture he'd held in the cafeteria. Unhurried, contained, his paper cup of black coffee somehow still faintly warm in his hands. She had a thermal blanket someone had given her, and she was still shaking slightly. And she sat down beside him without asking permission, and without saying anything for a long moment. "What happened in there?" she asked finally. He looked at the cup. The steam had long since stopped rising. The coffee had gone cold. He held it anyway. "Somebody needed help," he said. "I help." She looked at him for a long time, at his hands, at the steadiness that had not left him, at the quality of quiet that surrounded him, which she now understood was not the quiet of a simple man, but the quiet of very deep water, the kind of depth that doesn't announce itself. She didn't push. She had learned enough this morning to know that some truths came in shapes that questions couldn't reach. He finished the cold. He set the cup down on the step beside him. He stood. He stood and looked up at the hospital. The floors of lit windows, the patients and the nurses and the machines all continuing their patient, necessary work, entirely unaware of how close the morning had come to being something else entirely. He let it be what it was, real, complete. A life he had built with intention and lived inside with his whole self, even if it had lasted only 11 months, even if it was already over. Not a cover story, not a performance, a true thing. He had painted those murals, he had fixed those pipes, he had learned those names. That was real. He picked up his tools from beside the door where he'd left them, the worn canvas bag, the handle of the adjustable wrench worn smooth from use, and he carried them to the dumpster at the edge of the loading dock and set them down beside it, quietly, carefully, the way you set something down when you are done with it, and you want to leave it in good condition for whoever comes next. Then he walked away into the pale morning, his hands loose at his sides, his pace unhurried. No badge, no name, no record. The streets were waking up around him. A delivery truck, a woman walking a dog, the first faint warmth of sun beginning to cut through the grey. He did not look back. The quiet hands, vanishing again into the world, carrying everything they had ever known and leaving no trace of having been there at all.